We've got plenty to talk about this week anyway, mate. I think we should just
Aye.
just flow with it. I might even leave in my fucking story about my cat boots. What will this be? Episode 93? Maybe 92?
No, like 95, 96.
Is it?
I think Kieran was 94.
I'm double checking that.
Pretty sure Kieran was 94, I think.
Right. So he was. Aye, fuck's sake, man. Oh well, episode 95. Flying by.
Even with like a couple of weeks break. You know what I mean? Like,
I know, mate. I mean, even though there's only been like 10 days between this and the last podcast with Kieran, like, we had the two of them in the bag, so...
I think it's been about maybe 3 and a bit weeks or since we've actually sat down and like done this. In between times, it's been a bit weird at my end, man. It's been kind of tense. Like, the missus actually tested positive for COVID about 2.5 weeks ago. This was now our third sort of full isolation in the space of like 8 weeks. So I think it was pretty much the final nail for us. Like, thankfully we got through it without any symptoms or any deteriorations or anything like that, but I think it kind of was the thing that knocked the sort of final fight out us, where the 3 years were just me, Stacey and Andy, were just sat here staring at walls for 2 weeks. We just couldn't take any merit because they came so close together. It was just one of them where it got quite rough, but thankfully it never got dangerous, and you know, we were all quite comfortable, and you know, really the only enemy was boredom, you know what I mean? Like, thankfully at the end the avenue went back to work, starting to get back out into the world again, so that's something to like kind of start building back up again. Like, so it's been like an eventful yet uneventful 2 weeks in between times for me. Aye,
it's almost like super eventful mentally, but uneventful sort of physically, which is like just as fucking draining.
Those first 5 days were like terrifying. Like the dread we've had is that the two of them test positive because they're heavily asthmatic, and the first sort of 4 or 5 days between the positive test and starting to think, right, you know what, I think we're all right. We're like tense. Like, this is something that a lot of folk are going to be experiencing. You know, the spread increasing and stuff like that, and I can completely empathise with having been through it myself. Like, it's a really uncomfortable week. So I'm waiting just to see what happens, you know what I mean? Like,
aye, for sure. I mean, I experienced it in like a sort of microdose back at the start. I think we spoke about way back in episode fucking 80 something, whatever it was, in March, and I was saying to you, like, I've got a fever and a cough, and then your heat starts to play. So even without like a confirmed positive case, even though one of the housemates had tested positive, like, there was a couple of real days where it was like very little sleep happening, like high anxiety, high tension, like you're saying, and it really does impact a lot of things because you're very short and just everything's pissing you off. Like, I found even like the last sort of wee while, been thinking that it's kind of a case of when you're going to get it. Like, so
certainly feels like that at the minute.
If cases are going to keep going up and up and up and up, and unfortunately, I mean, England are in lockdown just now, as I'm sure everybody will be aware, but hopefully we'll know heading in the same direction. Hopefully, like, the sort of safeguards that we've put in place that England didn't put in place, like maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago, just kind of protect us for another full-scale lockdown.
Yeah. I seen the day that the Welsh Assembly had announced that they will remove themselves for the current, lockdown firebreaker restrictions that they've put in place. And although Scotland didn't go quite as far as Wales with the circuit breaker or whatever we're calling it, there has been a lot of really similar steps by both administrations in the build up to that, you know what I mean? So I'm hoping that we can see similar results, having followed a kind of similar path to Wales rather than the path that England's on. I think yesterday they had like 19,000 new confirmed cases in a single day. Like, America has had 100,000 new cases a day for the last 5 days. So there's definitely going to need to be like a readjustment in a lot of senses. Like, thankfully there seems to be chat of vaccines. or well,
Aye, so
thankfully,
a boner vaccine. Like, is it Schaefer? Isn't it Schaefer? That's the pen company.
I think it's pronounced Pfizer or Pfizer.
Pfizer, yeah, because I remember watching the Jake Gyllenhaal movie about it, Love and Other Drugs or something like that. It's a fucking horrible rom-com piece of shit, but he plays...
That'll be why I've not seen it.
He plays a pharmaceutical salesman at the boom Viagra. What's interesting is that Viagra was developed to try and help with like blocked heart valves, because obviously like it's about the increase of blood and the hard-ons seem to be like a side effect. But I wonder what they were trying to develop when they found the fucking COVID-19 vaccine. God knows, but I get a free Viagra pill with every fucking dose of vaccination.
get everybody back to it. I think it's one of the ones I seen the news and thought, oh well, cool, there's at least progress, there's like hope, which is something that has felt in pretty short supply up until this week, which we're probably going to cover extensively as we go. But I think the vaccine was, for me, good news. It's a choice between putting people at danger and believing David Icke, then, I think I'll just wait for my doctor's appointment and get on with it, you know what I mean? But I've also already seen and heard from people directly that are like, nah, I'm not putting anything the government sends to me in my arm, and you're just like, okay, fair enough. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just no engaging with it. I'm just trying to focus on the positives at the new. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, mate. I've seen the exact same.
Focus on some positives. You know what I mean?
I've seen the exact same. I've seen some people in like Instagram stories and being like, get this to fuck, no chance I'm touching this. And it's like, I mean, I've even seen people sharing shit about like nanobot technology going in through the fucking and like, well, it's almost,
I mean, that's literally the plot to a G.I. Joe movie. Like,
this is exactly what I was going to say, mate. I think people think that we're living in Marvel, like the Marvel universe. You know what I mean?
Is there some villain in a cave somewhere, like poisoning the world?
Well, it's Bill Gates and Tom Hanks, and it's no Donald Trump, obviously. But there's been some just like exactly what I was going to say next was I'm already seeing people saying like no chance, but I'm pretty sure all of these people would have got their BCG, would have got their measles, mumps, rubella, would have probably have had a cold or flu vaccine at some point early years. And obviously, like, it's another sort of example. We've spoke a few times about flat earth, but anti-vaccine is another example of something that's just literally been like cooked up in some fucking white woman's kitchen in Texas or something, and now is like pure taking grip of the planet. Like, everybody's just pure skeptical about this vaccine. I mean, I'll be for one. Like, I'll be taking it.
The overwhelming majority of folk will be queuing up in the streets for it. You know what I mean? Like, if it allows us to get back to some sort of normality, like, other people's choices are their own. I mean, there needs to be some consideration for how dangerous these people could be to the wider population, especially when there's still questions about how long your immunity lasts and stuff like that. On, the side of vaccine, it's still to be like peer reviewed and stuff. But as I said, for me, it was progress. It was a wee bit of hope at a time where, it's been a pretty dark couple of months for everybody, really. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Like, the prospect of Christmas is just making everybody like, I mean, obviously seasonal depression is actually a thing that affects everybody. It's no like a syndrome that, I mean, it will impact people more than it impacts other people, but the change in the seasons impacts every single person. Like, if you're getting up in a cold, dark morning and you're coming home from work in a cold, dark evening and you're not getting to see really a lot of sunlight, it does impact you big time. Not to mention like the vitamin D deficiency that you could...
Exactly.
Like lower levels. But I think that the news of a vaccine was kind of like welcomed because it's moving into that time of year, and I think people are starting to put Christmas decorations up. You're seeing that's happening a lot early, and I think people just need cheered up, mate. Like, we need this shit.
I think it's one of the very few years where I'm not going to be calling people cunts for putting Christmas decorations up in November. I'm just going to be like, you want to put fairy lights up in your house now, like, fucking go for it. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
The seasonal thing is something that does impact people, and I think when you're, like, even for myself, for example, like, during the spring and summertime, I was locked down just as I'm on now, but I could go out and I could garden, I could go out and go for a walk, I could, various other things. Like when you were up, it was sunlight, there was, as you say, things that you could still do. But as the sort of later nights and darker days have sort of dragged in, and it sort of coinciding with the fact that we were pretty much locked down in the house for most of that sort of, period, like, it did have an effect, because I don't know how many days I found myself looking at a window at the greyness and just being like pure, ugh, you know what I mean? Like, there is no gardening, I'm not going to wander about in the rain, you know what I mean? Like, can't do it anyway when you're locked down. Like, so it does have an impact. So any sort of slither of hope at the minute, I'm going to be holding on to over the top of, any sort of nonsense conspiracies. I know, obviously, we're going to be talking about bullshit conspiracies, like, probably for the rest of the episode. But the one that links this one to the other one that we're going to lead into was obviously the Don Jr. tweeting about how it was a coincidence that, oh my God, they got rid of my dad and the same day they found a COVID vaccine, like, coincidence? And you're like, yes, it was a complete coincidence. Like, no one was holding on to a vaccine to see what happened in the presidential election. You know what I mean? Like,
do you think that is that what they're alluding to?
That's what he alluded to in that tweet, but I think he got absolutely rinsed.
I mean, if you deconstruct that, even down to the fact that Pfizer they're a business, so like, is he hoping that, like, every single member of their board, every person, scientist, doctor that's worked on this is a Democrat, or is it, and that they're holding it back, they're potentially fucking putting millions at risk for a fucking deadly virus? Or is that business going to immediately try and get that vaccine into the general public and make hundreds of billions of dollars or pounds? Like, I mean, the first company to make this will be, I think, genuinely, I mean, if Viagra didn't, must have fuck knows what the numbers are like on Viagra, right? Because
right,
it was a wonder drug, right? So
I
think there was actually no other effective form of, like, remedy for erectile dysfunction before Viagra, and I think, like, STDs, old age pregnancies, all these things fucking skyrocketed. So, like, I think people were buying them hand over fist in the 90s when they first came out. So that would have made them a lot of money. This will be even bigger. This will be like stratospheric. I think they'll actually be like the Amazon of the pharmaceutical world. I think they'll just get a monopoly.
I think even the nature of the announcement, I mean, when you're talking about that desire to get information into the marketplace as quickly as possible, this was a test over something like 100 people.
96 people.
90% effect. It's not been peer reviewed. I mean, they literally got this information out as quickly as they possibly could, because what you've got is essentially 3/4 of the study done. You know what I mean? So they went as quickly as they possible. So the notion that anybody was holding off is absolute fucking crackpot nonsense. But again, this is what they've been churning out there all week. I mean, obviously we've had
absolutely, mate,
the election that thankfully and finally has seen an end to fucking Donald Trump as president of the United States. Like, could not come a day quick enough. You know what I mean? Like, and they made us wait for it, man, big time. Like, those sort of 3 or 4 days, again, just at the tail end of my isolation, I just was like 24-hour news central. It was horrific. Like, I think I get like a day and a half in before I was like, you know what? They're not calling this anytime soon, and I just started watching nonsense on the telly instead. But like, it was I sat up on election night to about 2 before I realised that it absolutely was not happening that night, and went to bed, and then spent most of the next day waiting, and then pretty much sort of gave up until the Saturday when, my face lit up like a Christmas tree, and my phone lit up like a Christmas tree, and you were like, right, okay, here we go. You know what I mean?
What's your mic's rubbing on your collar just a wee bit, mate? It's all right, mate. It wasn't too bad. I mean, I made a conscious effort to no engage with it on that level, but I mean, when I got up, what day was it that they would have could have announced? That was Tuesday. So I got up for the gym at 5, and I went in and I checked, and it was just inconclusive, and I was like, right, fuck it. And then at least twice a day I just went in and checked like the Twitter CNN bit where it was giving you like a sort of running total. I think it was kind of like similar to 2016 but in the opposite direction. I think it was kind of the morning on Tuesday morning, you kind of seen, right, this is going to go the Democrats' way. Like, that was the way that it was going. Like, Donald Trump had, 2 ways that he could have got to presidency, and I think Biden had like 4 or 5. So I was like, right, this is kind of like, this is going to be like 2016. I think 2016 was the first time that I'd ever really properly engaged in an American election, so I don't really understand how it works. So I was just looking at it on like a basic sort of how many seats does he need to become president. I mean, we knew that we sort of seen it coming. They were already shouting for the fucking rooftops about voter fraud and Miller voter fraud, and then he was saying that his legal team didn't get in to see, like they should have been able to get in to sort of observe the count, and they weren't allowed to do that. It looks as if like he might try and drag this at the court. I mean, I don't doubt that 100% Biden's going to be president come like January next year or whatever. But I think we've probably got a lot more sort of drama to come yet. And I
think we've got theatre to come. I don't know if it will come to the stage of actual drama.
Yeah, but I mean, sort of enough that will distract people on Twitter, enough that sort of takes care of that for the next sort of few months. It will be
definitely. So this is as we said, I think a couple of weeks ago in the build up to it, we knew the cry was going to be election fraud because everybody everybody on the face of the planet knew that that's what he was going to be whining on about, regardless of what happened. I mean, he won the last time and still pissed and moaned about fucking voter fraud, so it was going to be number one on the playlist. You know what I mean? Like, I found some parts of it quite funny. Everybody knew that the mail-in votes in the year of pandemic were going to be huge. He actively told his supporters not to engage with it, and then lost as a result of it. So he kind of like shot himself in the foot in that regard, which was a nice irony. You know what I mean? Like that he lost as a result of something he directly told his followers to do. And then the postal votes are the deciding factor. And Biden was out there for day one telling his people to vote via mail, day early, day to avoid queues and help with pandemic, blah, blah, blah. And it's been the right course of action, and you've seen it play out over the course of days. Unfortunately, it took like 3 days longer than I think all our attention spans could handle, but it's legit. And like these chats are like not being allowed to watch votes was the difference between being told to watch it at 12 feet away to being told to watch it at 6 feet away.
Right.
They're being extremely, extremely selective with what they're putting out there. And I think it's quite telling that it's Tuesday now, we're a week down the line, and there is still no one with any sort of concrete proof of voter fraud anywhere in the United States. Not even been any whispers of evidence. It's all been pretty much hearsay and just bullshit, you know what I mean? Like, and I think it's in line with that presidency being just nonsense. And like all the stuff after it is exactly the same tone. I mean, I find it a bit odd that in the 8 years since Trump started tweeting about Obama's birth certificate, that Twitter waited until the day after he lost the US election to start thinking about really censoring what this fucking dickhead was saying. You know what I mean? Like, he also went on these tweet storms where Twitter just warning the whole thing, and you're like, I wonder maybe would we be here if when he started nonsense about birth certificates in Obama before he was even running, and actually went, no, this is actual nonsense. Like, you can't believe this. Would we necessarily be here? But to wait until the day after he gets beat to be like, right, censor everything this guy says, and you're just like, the horse is bolted, guys. Like, he's already like missed the boat on this one. You know what I mean?
It's a poor show. It's a poor show, and I mean, I think like on that point specifically there, who knows, mate? And we probably wouldn't be here, and it is a bit of a shame. I think it's just another example of like the tech giants being just super reactive. I don't think that there's any like, I mean, when you're first saying that there, it took them to the next day. I was thinking, would we have been even there had he won? Would they be censoring like his bullshit? Because the guy just spews bullshit 24/7, doesn't he? Like it's pretty much all like lies.
He's also been the best Twitter advertisement of all time. Like in terms of like his interactions and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like he is the engine that drives a lot of Twitter's, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, and it is a business, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, we've managed to monetize conversation or opinion, which I suppose it's that the fucking that was long ago. We monetized opinion, but mass opinion, you know what I mean? Aye, but mass opinion, like no, well, our opinions, our clicks, everything that we do on the internet is absolutely worth a fucking a pound. Do you know what I mean? So we just don't get to see the spoils. Like it's definitely been monetized. That's for fucking sure. But it's a business, so I suppose if they're going to go down the road of like shutting down the biggest mouthpiece, the biggest attractor of clicks, the biggest attractor of advertising revenue, like it would sort of come across as a very, very bad business plan. But I don't know if it's
wait until the day after it gets beat, so it's like a pure shite bag move.
It does seem quite calculated, but also, I mean, I'm sure they've known that the shithousery was coming in the day after the election, and so they could absolutely put like a team of people on to like fact checking stuff. If they were going to do that before, you probably need just a section of Twitter for Donald Trump that just watched everything that he did to try and call it all out. I mean, I was reading an interesting thing about how Adobe are actively trying to develop software that sort of spots misinformation. And it's in conjunction with like the deep fake stuff. So I think probably this type of stuff will become automated as we go forward, where it'll have certain sort of words that hit a trigger and they'll check it and they'll be able to do it. But again, I think my point was, it's just an example of how we've created something in the sense of like Twitter, and we're reacting to the outcomes. We're like 100% like 5 to 10 steps behind technology. It's just kind of like pulling away phase, even more and more. And I think that actual thing for Twitter, I hope it's not been right. He's lost the election. Let's just start fact checking him. You should have been fact checking him 4 years ago, because the guy's been in a fucking heavy position of power and privilege. And the fact that you're no fucking fact checking him's an absolute fucking disgrace. Do you know what I mean?
I read somewhere that in the course of his presidency, Trump had told 25,000 verifiable lies, and you're like, you know what I mean? You're like, there's only like 300 days a year, and he was only there 4 years. You know what I mean?
Did they include that he's the biggest feminist? Nobody respects women more than him. Nobody's greater on the military than he is. Yeah. Nobody knows America more than Donald Trump does.
He was better for black people than Abraham Lincoln.
So this is something that unfortunately kind of like brought me back down to earth a wee bit, was the dude crying on CNN.
Right.
So let's just get this guy's name, because I was reading a lot about him. And
he's quite a well-established newsreader. I can't place his name either myself, to be honest with you.
Van Jones.
Right.
So Van Jones, African-American guy. Joe Biden gets elected president on Saturday morning, and he does this. He sits and he sort of cries because, obviously, I mean, I get it, and I think like the internet sort of reacted in a sort of positive way towards this guy. But this is the type of thing that's kind of like brung me back down to earth, especially when I think about Biden as well, and what kind of president is this guy going to be. I mean, I think I'd say to Sean, we should spend at least a week celebrating that Donald Trump is not the president of America anymore, and then we need to be very, very careful. Well, also, not even just getting back to work, being very, very careful that he doesn't leave a legacy that just comes in a wave, because I don't think it's gone. I think this is what people are getting wrong. But anyway, before we talk about that, Van Jones sits and he cries on CNN. Obviously, like, we've had a racist, sexist, homophobic, science-denying president for the last 4 years. Like, it's a relief for a lot of people around the planet. We've seen it here. Not imagine what you'd be like if you lived in LA, if you lived in New York, if you lived in Philadelphia, Boston, Washington. These places are like actually being impacted day to day by like this guy being.
New York looks like fun places to be on Saturday.
So there's been mass like people out cheering. Then photographs of this guy came out where he's giving Donald Trump the thumbs up. He's sitting at his inauguration with a big smile on his face. He's taking selfies with Donald Trump Jr. and no Biden Trump, the other one. What's his other son?
Eric.
Eric Trump, and he's taking pictures at the Conservative sort of convention. And so, like, this is my sort of worry with Biden, is that he's just a wolf in sheep's clothes, and we need to really, really watch, because the establishment have shifted to this sort of relief, like anti-Trump, whereas I think the media will probably be concerned because, I mean, as we know, they've already resorted to like shady tactics and clickbait tactics to keep their industry alive. And Donald Trump, like, I think I remember during the 2016 presidential campaign, CNN had him on the screen double the amount that Fox did.
Yeah.
So we need to just be very, very careful that we don't just sort of buy this bullshit that's getting sold, because, like I said, my worry with Biden is that he's going to just come in and there's going to be no real change happening. I think somebody had tweeted something about, I don't know how true this is because it's just somebody's tweet, that he'd said to the representatives of like the financial sector, it'll be business as usual. So even though we've seen the end of Trump, like I said, let's celebrate that for a week. Let's look back and let's try not let it happen again. But we need to be careful that we've not voted in somebody that's just going to keep business as usual, and that Trumpism doesn't really go anywhere, and that it comes back again and we end up with somebody else that could be much worse. Yeah.
I mean, I'm slightly less concerned with Biden. He is not the radical that, you know, Bernie Sanders and a Bernie Sanders administration would have brought in. And there was some quite encouraging results for progressives all across America, which was really, really quite good. A lot of the AOC-style progressives that had run previously were all re-elected on the Democratic side, which was a really encouraging sign. There was some really, like, progressive law changes in terms of like drug administration across American states. Like Oregon, I'm pretty sure, largely decriminalised all drugs. Marijuana legislation passed in some like half a dozen different states. Even
I think Biden's committed to legalising or decriminalising marijuana federally.
Yeah.
So that would be a big step. That would be a big
tax the utter shit out of it, you know what I mean? Like, there was also like big wins for progressive candidates. So I mean, there was the first black congresswoman in, I think it was Missouri, which to me felt wild in the 21st century that we're still having the first black anything in, you know, a country like America or the UK or, you know, any of these other places with sizable, you know, populations. Like, but we had the first 2 trans representatives elected, one of which is a woman of colour as well. We had like gay mayors, we had non-binary people elected into positions. Like so, like the LGBT community had massive steps forward at the ballot box during this election as well. So I mean, there are progressive moves at a very local level in America. Biden, Harris, I mean, she's a prosecutor who had been very strict on sort of law and order. He's, as you say, he looks like an establishment figure, but I mean, he has got a good history on things like apartheid, on like, you know, he's a big driver of like the interventions in like Bosnia and Yugoslavia and stuff like that. Like, he's very, very well respected on the world stage. Like, he is essentially a kind of safe pair of hands, but after 4 years of this nutter, like, I can kind of get why
America needs it, mate.
He was the guy to do it. There's also talk of the fact that they think he's going to deliberately only be a one-term president himself, and that there's already chat that he really just wanted to get it and make way for Harris to run as the, you know, presidential nominee in 4 years' time. How true that is, again, I don't know, but that's what people are talking about, you know what I mean? So,
it looks like a walking corpse, so he might, like, I mean, the Biden wins tweet that went out, I was saying to Sean, I was like, zoom in on his face, man, like, what the fuck's going on with his face? Like, his eyes are sinking into the back of his head, but so whether or not he makes it to the end of his first term, I don't know, but I think, like, if that does happen, do you know what? I think I would be quite disappointed, because I want the first female president to be elected. Do you know what I mean? I don't want there to be any sort of way of them going, look how this has been manipulated. And
a coronation.
Exactly. Like, I think, like, I would like her to, if it is going to be Kamala Harris, I would like her to be elected. What was interesting was quite a lot of the sort of right-wing commentary talking about Kamala Harris's law and order record as like some sort of negative, and you're like, guys, you were cheerleading Donald Trump like 2 weeks ago. Like, This is basically like you going, aye, well, your candidate was kind of less an arsehole than it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, aye, she's not a left-winger. Okay, they're not going to break down the industrial war complex. They're not going to like drag Wall Street out of the coals. They're not going to like break the monopolies, Amazon, Apple. But like, I think that what I was particularly pleased about, and this is what I had said to multiple people, it's the first vote for hope that we've had since, and on like a one of the major, like, do you know what I mean? Us here in the UK and in America have been perpetually like right wing and moving even further towards the right for the last nearly 20 years. So that's what I was particularly pleased about. It was a sign that we're moving in the right direction, but I don't think we're there yet. And I would love to see. I would like Biden to come in and actually just keep his promises. I think the things that he's promised, like raising the minimum wage, legalization of marijuana, I think taking back some of the Trump stuff that's been put out there.
He'll do to Trump what Trump did to Obama, and he'll executive order everything that he's ever tried to do out of existence. Because that's what you do with executive orders, you just reverse them. The positive I'm taking is that I think the American voters are starting to recognise that the presidential election isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all. There's been so much focus on the presidency as the sort of centre of American power that people in the population have become really sort of tunnel vision with the presidency. I think when you look at, particularly in places like Georgia, where Stacey Abrams, who had run previously, I think sort of 2 or 3 years ago as a mayoral candidate and lost because of, largely black voter suppression in the state, has spent those subsequent years registering voters. Now, she registered 800,000 voters, something like half of which are black, in Georgia. And the state of Georgia went to Joe Biden by 10,000 votes. So those what you're saying, 2/3 or 3/4 of that 800k voters went with her. Then she's basically swung a huge state in the presidential election, and I think it's going to be used. It's going to be used as a template to combat voter suppression, because while the Republicans own places like the Senate and local legislators, which are probably the only legitimate threat left to Biden at the minute, and I'll explain why in a sec, but like, they can organise at local levels, win locally, and those local wins can have an impact at a national level when the presidency comes round, rather than what they've done in the past is try to win the presidency and hope that the goodness and the hope sort of trickles down, whereas actually now the AOCs and the Omars and the Sanders have started building for the ground up, and I think it's a more effective way of handling things. I mean, they've swung Georgia. There's now 2 Senate seats in the mix that are in runoff elections in January, and I think this is why we won't see Trump go anywhere anytime soon, because these 2 Republican sitting senators in Georgia need Trump's vote to win because of this voter registration. They just lost the state in a presidential election, and now the 2 Senate seats are in the mix. So, I mean, this Abrams could have had a massive impact, and her team, had a massive impact on the presidential campaign and potentially swung the Senate back Democrat in like whatever 5 weeks, 6 weeks time. So this is how you beat them. If they want to go and legislate and gerrymander and, fuck with censuses so that they can try and rig the system as the Republican Party has done all across America in the last 30 years, 40 years. This is how you beat them, is you actually go and speak to people and get them involved and make sure they engage when the actual votes come round. And that's the big positive that I've took at it, is that there's actual, although the president is not by any means a progressive figure, and neither is his vice president-elect, it doesn't matter now. Like, people get so sick during Trump that they get fed up waiting for it to happen, and they're out there making it happen for themselves. And I think democratically that's something that is like, we should be like really fucking happy about.
Aye, absolutely, man. Aye, so where does this leave us? Because like I said a minute ago, mate, like my like knowledge of I mean, I could tell you like 10 covert CIA fucking operations that started at the start of the Second World War and probably continue to. But see, my actual
10 CIA directors, but
maybe one. But like, what state is American politics in now after this election? Where does this leave us?
At the minute, like, kind of like Donald Trump's campaign, like standing outside a dildo shop, screaming into the void.
That was fucking glorious, man. And I think like that's a mental checkpoint to talk about Borat too. Like when we get to like a bit when we talk about what we're watching, but that Giuliani thing, man. I mean, surely not. Surely they didn't think that was the 4 seasons.
I've got no idea what the fuck happened there, but like, what I want to be is the dude who took that call in the 4 seasons, garden centre and being like, sorry, who? Oh, fuck it, I'm on run. You know what I mean? Like 10 grand. You know what I mean? Like,
guess what, boss? Guess what, boss? Donald Trump's campaign's coming to do a fucking press conference outside and just be like pure. It's either been that kind of ignorant excitement or it's been somebody that's been pure, aye, cool, yep. Aye, yep, no bother at all.
Wind up.
Or no, like just probably went, once they've realised it's legit, like we're just going to let this happen. We're not going to we're not going to bother telling them, by the way, we're not a 4 seasons hotel. We're like a local shop, like in between a fucking sex shop and a fucking gun shop. You know what I mean?
So I seen a tweet on my personal thread, a thread on my personal feed about a journalist who was in the car park, and they were like, the actual 4 seasons we all thought we were going is like 12 miles away. Journalists are showing up. The press conference is about to start in 10 minutes. Like a lot of journalists get out their cars, looked about, went fuck this, and turned around and left again. It says, but this guy actually like live tweeted his own like experience of the press conference, it being total bullshit, and then him basically just walking away 10 minutes into it. It was absolutely wild that you've got that kind of nonsense going on. But again, it's in with that chaos that has came with the last 4 years. But in terms of where we are now, like there is no meaningful evidence of election fraud whatsoever. There has been court cases that have come in and been battered straight out of court. The big threat, or the remaining threat, and it's like a kind of through the eye of the needle thing for Republicans, it would essentially be, considered a coup, but in a lot of senses, but it is also Mitch McConnell, and these people are absolutely shameless. And it's that a lot of decisions in the build-up to the election at a state level, and every state runs their own election, even though so a lot of different processes, etc. We know that already. In individual states, some decisions were made by governors or by election secretaries on a sort of unilateral basis because there was a pandemic. And in certain states that have got like Republican legislators, they're now saying that those decisions should have been either made or ratified by the state senates and congresses, which the Republicans control. And what they're going to try and argue is that because these decisions were unilateral, they were incorrect, and that they need to be reassessed and ratified by the actual state senate or the state congress. And if they're not, then the decisions that impacted the ballots, like letting people mail in stuff that shows up 7 days late, have to be reversed. So essentially what they're trying to do is, or what they're thinking about doing or talking about doing, is like going to the local level and trying to retroactively invalidate votes by changing decisions that were made by heads of whatever way their actual legislatures. I don't know how viable it is, but when you look at Georgia, for example, these 2 senators that are now in runoff elections in January, both Republican. The election head was a Republican. They have now turned on him and said that he didn't do his job right and that he now needs to resign and blah, blah, blah. So they are now turning their focus of why they lost onto this guy who was the decision maker in that state to try and obviously undermine his position. And if they undermine his position, they can undermine his decision making, and a precedent is set that could then maybe be used in other states to allow reversals and like de-justification for senates and congresses at the state level to actually go back and try and vote this stuff down retroactively. It would be electoral suicide. I mean, I can't believe anybody's even voted it, but there have been people talking about this type of thing. Even the day, like Barr, the Attorney General, was directing federal prosecutors to investigate election fraud, to the point where the guy in charge of the electoral investigations at a federal level resigned because like there is no evidence. Like, we run a robust system. Like, I'm not going to direct my guys to basically investigate elections that are not at risk. So even to this day, we've got higher legislating, authority within what's left of the Trump administration,
right,
still trying to work his ticket in as any and all underhand ways possible. So there is like a tiny, tiny risk.
The decision
like a tiny behind it would be crazy.
A tiny crack of light for fascism, because I mean, basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to just rig an election if that's the case.
They'd need to openly steal it. They'd need to openly steal it. But at the same time, when you look at guys like Mitch McConnell and that, they've got the brass neck to think about it. And I'm no a Republican insider, and I've heard about this fucking plan for half a world away. You know what I mean? Like, so it's in the ether. Like, people are talking about it. You know what I mean? Like, which is the only worry I've got left in that respect. The rest of it is, as Joe Biden says, is, the Secret Service have got no issue throwing trespassers at the White House. So the Constitution does not require that he concedes. The Electoral College will have come back by January the 5th, January the 6th, whenever it happens. And when the Electoral College confirms, but as I say, the Senate decisions that we're talking about could interfere with the Electoral College, and that's where it comes in, because this is where they ratify themselves at state and levels with these types of guys. As I say, it's unlikely, but it's still being talked about. But come January the 5th, if it's all done and dusted as we expect it at the moment, then he'll be getting toughed out no matter what he says.
And where does this leave? But so where's Biden as far as like a presidency? Because I remember when Obama won his second term, the Republicans had won a certain aspect of American politics, and so he was like hands tied.
The Senate. So at the moment, it looks as though that's probably largely what's going to happen to Biden. The Democrats own the Congress, which is the lower chamber, like the House of Commons. They have lost like 10 seats already, though. So the Republicans did make gains in the Congress. Georgia will likely not go 2 Democrat seats. So you would imagine that they will keep a very slender control of the Senate. They have the Supreme Court, and Biden will have the presidency. So essentially, they'll
50-50.
They'll just shut down. Well, I mean, everything needs Senate approval. Everything that he can do legislatively needs Senate approval, and the Senate will probably shut him down exactly in a similar kind of way to Obama. We don't know. There was chat of McConnell being more open to talk to Biden than he would have been some of his predecessors. The implication being because he's white and not black. But
that's
again,
a joke.
Well, let's see. But who knows? It doesn't look great for him in terms of passing very much that, is all going to require some form of Republican support. But at the same time, that's one of Biden's strengths across his career, is that he is very much a kind of across the sort of across the border sort of personality. But again, whether the high ups now allow that the way they used to in the past is debatable. What I mean?
And he did. I did see something where he was saying that I'm not going to rule this as like a Republican, as a Democratic president, or leaning towards being like a right. I'm just going to be the president of the United States and try and represent as many of the people as I can as possible, which is kind of alarming, for me, for like a sort of a Democratic president to come in and go, yeah, I'm not going to rule as a Democratic president. I'm going to basically saying I'm going to be a centrist, which we know that he is. What sort of comes up for me here is, and I had a chat with somebody on Instagram, a previous guest on Instagram, and I think we're starting to see maybe the same conclusion happening here. Are radicals like Corbyn and Sanders electable in 2020? Like, as we've seen a lot of sort of Trump, we're in the aftermath of Trump, so is the sort of left going to be happy with a more sort of centrist person at the helm? And
they should be happier.
Happy, yeah. Is this the sort of middle ground that we're going to need to just, instead of pushing for a more radical left, there isn't that much support for that? So then it kind of leaves a vacuum. It leaves a vacuum that there's enough support on the radical right to sort of like take. So we all just kind of need to throw our support behind the person in the centre so that we don't end up with this fucking nutter that's sitting there here on the right wing. Do you know what I mean?
So I definitely see that point of view. I mean, again, kind of similar to what I've said previously already with, the progressives at a lower level. I think this is where the UK can be probably more effective, like where centre-left, somebody like a Starmer or whatever it is, just the guy that looks like a prime minister, whatever that means, looks like a president, whatever that means, at the helm, and people actually just taking care of themselves at a local level, so for all the various bits and bobs in America, you look out here like in Glasgow, some of the people we've spoke to over the years, some of the people we've not spoke to, like guys that live in rent, and organisations along those kind of lines, like Better Than Zero, who we've had, who are actually like taking the progressive ideas they've got and applying them at a local level, and no really, having opinions and policy on what's going on at a national level, but focusing on where they can actually make a difference. And I think maybe that's the answer for the left, is to just put the centrist face on it and then just go about what you were doing at a local level anyway. You know what I mean?
Right, because that's what the Tories do. That's what the Tories did, wasn't it? That's what they did with Cameron, was they put the electable figure at the helm of the party and chip away underneath it to get whatever it is that you want, whether it be a fucking EU referendum, which is what they wanted, and he had to give them it because he needed their support. Aye, man, that is kind of, I mean, we said that right back when I think I asked the question and we didn't really answer it when we were talking about it. Like, if Starmer was like Tony Blair without Iraq, would you accept it? Would we be happy? Would we be happier? Yeah. Is it the kind of sort of compromise that the left needs to make amidst all cops are bad, and like, do you know what I mean? Like that sort of like real. I think
the end result is that progress left is better than no progress. So if we're going to stand on the outside pointing fingers at the likes of Johnson, at the likes of Trump, and not be able to actually get involved in the process in any meaningful capacity, as the Labour Party just failed to do at the last election, are we not just better? Sometimes accepting like the political reality that a Corbyn or a Sanders is too radical in appearance, at least for most voters to be palatable. Why not? Just take a Cameron or a Blair or a Starmer or a Biden and throw them up as the face of it and be like, right, now stay out our road while we actually go and do what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, I think, and lieu of like massive left-wing wins, which don't seem to be happening anytime soon, you just work with what you've got, because, as I say, making some progress is better than making none.
Aye, absolutely, mate. So, have you watched Borat?
So, no yet. Stacey did, and I read the articles on Giuliani and stuff like that, and I've got to say I wasn't surprised, because we're talking about a guy here whose first wife was his second cousin. You know what I mean? So the notion
that true?
Aye,
fuck's sake.
Aye. So like the notion that he's somehow some mad sexual deviant probably didn't ring a lot of alarm bells with me, to be honest with you. Don't get me wrong, the situation he's in is extremely fucking just horrible, where, he really is a creepy old bastard, you know what I mean? But I don't know. Republicans and sex scandals in the build-up to election, I was just like, I'm a bit done with it.
I suppose, like, spoiler alert, if anybody's not seen Borat, I'll give you my opinion on
a newspaper or a website in the last month.
Exactly. My real thing on it, I was like, I'm keen to watch this. I want to see what the situation was like. It wasn't quite as bad as what it was made out, but also it wasn't as innocent as he made out. It lay in the middle. So he didn't. I don't think he knew she was 15 until Sacha Baron Cohen came into the room and started screaming, "She's 15, she's 15," right?
I think she was actually like 22 or something. She
didn't look 15 either, mate. Like, to be honest, like,
it's probably not the phrase to use on this one, mate.
Well, put it this way, right? Put it this way: if you were asked to go to day press, you wouldn't be thinking she's a minor or what. You'd be thinking she's an adult. She looks her age.
If I was asked to go and day press, I wouldn't also be thinking, let's duck into this nearby bedroom and see what happens.
Absolutely. She did like flirt with him right out the traps. She was touching his knee. She was saying, "Oh, I really like you. Like, you're one of my heroes," and all that. Right? Obviously, again, no any excuse for what happened. But the bits where his story just doesn't thing me up is that he totally like put his hand inappropriately at the sort of smaller back at the top of your arse, and then when he was claiming to tuck his shirt in, that is what he's doing, but he definitely went down and cupped his fucking cock and balls. Like, there is no two ways about it. And as soon as the door opened into the hotel room, he pounced up. So for me, like, if you were just tucking your thing, man, and you're at a media event and the door opens, you're just going to continue doing what you're doing. The fact that he pounced up told me that there was something just about to happen. I think that they stopped point blank. But it was creepy as fuck, man. I mean, he was salivating, absolutely salivating. Do you know what I mean?
I seen the running of the Karens sketch, which I thought was quite funny, almost like the, Pamplona Bull Run, except with the papier-mâché like Karen that was there. The first one was brilliant. Last couple of weeks, I just was not in the mood for that level of cringe to be. Something I'll definitely get around to, but I just hadn't at the time. I mean, like,
you're just like, nah. What have you been watching in?
What have I watched recently? Not an awful lot. For a change, like, filled the last couple of weeks more with like some gaming and sort of finishing off the various books that we've had on the go and stuff like that.
Keeping yourself sane, mate.
I did go through that Black Sail, which was, I thought, I had been on that bit of that sort of cowboy kick recently. I figured that I might get the same enjoyment out of watching a kind of pirate thing. And I did. Like, so, now I want to be a pirate and a pirate cowboy. But
where's that? Is that Netflix or?
It's Amazon. It's like a sort of 4th season prequel to Treasure Island. Somebody's taken all the characters for Treasure Island and brought it sort of 10 years before it all sort of kicks off. And it sort of winds up as at the end of the season is kind of the start of Treasure Island type thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
I'd kind of hoped that they'd have done a Treasure Island, season it, but they didn't. But it was quite good. Like, it's Michael Bay, so the action sequences are awesome, but there's just like gratuitous nudity, the whole way through it because he's a mad perv. That way, like a season usually, like Game of Thrones, where season 1's just tits everywhere, and then season 2, 3, everybody's actually like famous now, and they've got it in their contracts that they don't need to do that shit anymore. Well, Michael Bay had Black Sail. Well, I was watching season 4, and there was still like just unnecessary amounts of nudity for something that you've already watched 3.5 seasons of. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need the hook. You don't need me to keep coming back. I'm 3.5 seasons in. I'm in. You know what I mean? But the boat sequences and shit, like some of the like sea battles and stuff, were like extremely well done. You know what I mean? But other than that, I've been going off my nut with Red Dead. Like, I've been playing that just every waking moment practically. It's so immersive, and it's been such an easy way to pass time over the course of the last 2 weeks that I've just ended up pure inside it. You know what I mean? But then that's the benefit of game. And I was actually toying with the notion of like doing it on Twitch, because I'd got an update on my phone, and I was like, do you know what? Twitch is there now, Discourse is there, and I'm basically a sheep, and I was bored, and I signed up, but I was like, I don't know how either of the two of these things work. But then I was like, oh, do you know what? I'll get Twitch on my PlayStation. I'll just spend some time like streaming or whatever it is, and then realised that I spend half my time like reading walkthroughs and stuff, and I don't think anybody wants that content in their life. You know what I mean? Like,
realistic gaming.
Watching this guy basically walk his way through.
I think that's why the sort of
100 hours.
I think that's why like the funnier or the popular Twitch streams are either guys that are really good at gaming, or people playing that fucking truck simulator, or like Among Us or whatever it is that people playing, because it's just so simple that you can sit and just have a bit of banter when you're sitting streaming on Twitch. But
I think but you never know. We'll maybe have like a Rebel City Games night or something one time.
A Twitch stream. That's if my fucking PlayStation even works anymore, mate. Honestly, like, if I turned that on, the dust that would come out the fucking disk drive would be ridiculous. It's just not being switched on. It's not even plugged in. It's just an ornament. It's just an expensive ornament. And what's even more ridiculous about it is that I've even seen myself going, might get a PS5, and I'm like, slap myself down going, why the fuck would you spend fucking £400-500, whatever the fuck it is, on this new games console. When you did that with the PS4, and I must have accumulated about 100 hours in 4 or 5 years. Like, it's
I think you went through a spell of playing like the Star Wars game, didn't you? And then that was about it.
Battlefront, Call of Duty, Battlefront, and a couple of the Call of Duty games, and UFC 3. I had like a month where I played UFC 3, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But see, other than that, man, it just, I don't know, it just doesn't date for me anymore. Maybe I'm going to hold
off. I'm going to hold off on the PlayStation 5. Like, I bought the PlayStation 4 just as it came out because I'd recently been made redundant at that point, and I was like, fuck it, I'm buying a full price console because it's the one and only time I can actually afford it. And I waited like 18 months for like an actual PlayStation 4 game to come out, so I'm just going to hold off. I've got loads. I love the story games, as I say, the Tomb Raiders and Spider-Man, Batman, Red Dead, etc. And I've got like tons of stuff in my library that I've never even played through yet. So I'm going to give it a year and let the games actually catch up with the console. Although the new Spider-Man one looks phenomenal, and it's only because the last one, the Marvel Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4, was one of the slickest games I've ever played in my life. Like, it was like the fight, the combat, everything about it was just phenomenal. So if I'm getting the PlayStation 5, or when I get the PlayStation 5, I'll definitely get in Spider-Man with it, because the game's just, it looks amazing. So it does.
Aye, I've seen the trailer and stuff for it. But anyway, mate, I need to bounce because I've got clients this afternoon. It's been good catching up with you, mate. But
aye, man. Try and speed it up a wee bit over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, as maybe we start to come out of lockdowns and that. But we'll wait and see. You know what I mean? I'm quite happy plugging away with a guest here, a guest there, and a bit of blether while it's just no fair to ask folk to get involved. I mean, all the charities and groups that we've had in the past, and how do you ask them to come and get involved in this type of thing when there's actual people in real need at the minute, you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
We'll see how we go, but I'll speak to you again soon, mate.
Aye, no worries, mate. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.